they're gonna freak out when I tell them what happened. So this is likely to prove an interesting one. I've got two RTUs having issues up here. Both of these are carriers. Really not sure what I'm gonna find. This particular one, I may do these as separate calls. More than likely they will be. But this particular one is having some very interesting issues. That's just water. The blower motor won't ramp past the minimum speed, and it won't send a signal to the, it's on a VFD on this particular one. And yeah, it's just it's acting really strange. And they had compressors trip the other day, but they checked fine, but they never could get this unit to ramp up. So the blower is definitely running slower than it should be. We've got a full load in the space. It's turning the right direction. So we don't show any alarms, which is interesting. So the down button definitely does not work. All right, let's go with outputs. That's all it says, it's just on. It's not ramping up though, so let's go back to our inputs, because these do have static control. Supply pressure is 0, 0. So we're not reading any supply air pressure. So far everything I've been told is holding true. I'm aware of this much thus far. Supposedly we're not getting an output, so that like the drive wasn't getting any kind of an output from the controls telling it to ramp up, which is intriguing. Oh, you know what we could do? We could come in here and go to set points. It's where a down arrow would be really nice. Doesn't look like I'm gonna get it. So I do know we recently had to change ECB1 because it failed. We may need to go back over to the other side. And I really wonder, I mean, we're not showing any static pressure, but all of that comes through here. I'm trying to see what's feeding that drive. Let's go back over to the other side, because what I'm looking for may be over there. Indoor fan inverter. So this is what we replaced. This is ECB1. This is your static. See some really poor connections. Nothing a technician did. See address dip switches. Looks fine. I mean, we know it's communicating, because that was the code, was it stopped communicating back to the rest of the system as soon as we replace this, which these three wires here should be the comm bus. Once we replaced it, everything went to working fine. So let's take a closer look at this schematic then. It shows ECB2 on A01 J9. Inverter fan accessory. It's a CH550, so it's a ABB drive from the factory on J9 on 2. Okay, so if we look at J9, pull the feather out of the way. That is what's running our speed reference to our fan. So it's a 0 to 20 milliamp. Alright, so note that all address dip switches should be set to on. All address dip switches should be set to off, except for one. Alright, all in the off position. I mean the on, sorry. So all of these are in on. Only switch 1 is in off, which is what it calls for. Note that the address dip switch 1 should be off and all others should be on. So we're addressed properly. We don't have any alarms, which is the really weird part. I wonder if something is going wrong with this ECB2. Which we have this old board sitting here for whatever reasons. Works, but corroded. Spare only. The drive acts like, which they said they confirmed. I'm probably about to call the technician, ask him where they confirmed it, because the way they said it the other day made it sound like they actually checked the speed reference at the VFD, and they weren't getting any like speed call. It wasn't calling for it, which is, again, it's just interesting. Okay, I had a couple of phone calls I had to take care of while I was kind of looking through this, and I talked to the tech, but they're gonna freak out when I tell them what happened. So yeah, as you saw, that navigator was not really working well, so I ended up going down to the truck. I got my little plug-in navigator. I prefer this display anyway. It's a whole lot easier to use regardless. Yeah, I ended up going in, and as soon as I plugged it in, it brings up the general kind of cycle menu, and HVAC mode right here, HVAC mode was set to disabled. And I thought, well, hang on, well, that's weird, because occupied was yes, and that's what we kept looking at, was the occupied. It showed yes, but the HVAC was disabled. So I ended up backing out all the way, and I came down to service tests. And when I came down to service tests, stop was set to yes. And that tells me that while we were troubleshooting and we had to come in and change out of the board, they were having a lot of issues with that display, and somewhere along the way they had to have accidentally put it in stop, because they were trying to run it in test, and I'm thinking somehow either it accidentally got put in stop, or when they were changing a parameter somewhere, it automatically changed that to stop. Either is very possible. I don't know which. Either way, without getting this, I mean, as you saw, I tried making it work through that. With the buttons not working right, it just was not really cooperating. But seeing it on this interface made it very clear. So I ended up going to that, you know, selecting it, changing it back to no. And as soon as I did, this thing has ramped up, took off. Our static pressure has, as you can see, is coming up. Now the space has a heavy load on it, all that good jazz. Technicians are going to be absolutely peeved by that, because they put a ton of time trying to figure this out. Now granted, they didn't have that little comm module that I do.